Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. It's Matthew Tobe from Unapologetically Jewish. I want to welcome our great, incredible guest. I've been looking forward to this for a while, ever since I sat there and binged a podcast that he had done. So I want to welcome Jesse Brown, the publisher and host of the podcast CanadaLand. Jesse, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Matthew.
Anytime. Thanks for coming on board here. So let's just jump right into it. I think the biggest part you've been doing a lot beforehand for October 7th, but what really brought me into your sphere was the podcast you did a few months ago. Let's dive into that. Let's dive into even how you named it. Give me everything you got from that point, and we'll go from there.
It's called "What Is Happening Here," and that's what it's about. It's really just trying to get an understanding of the situation for Jews in Canada specifically since October 7th, but more broadly, just in North America, the diaspora outside of Israel, how everything seems to have changed for us, the way the world looks at us, the experiences we're having, where's it all heading? But I wanted to pursue this as a journalist, as an exploration, like really asking the question, because my experience since October 7th has been one where every day there are people telling me that what I'm seeing is not what I'm seeing, that it's not a campaign against the Jews, that it's not hatred of Jews, that it's a political movement and a legitimate one, and a lot of motives being ascribed, like, why are you calling it anti-Semitic, a lot of trolls and, maybe even bots doing that, but also like people I've known for years, people whose opinions I respect, really like people who normally are very sensitive to issues of racism and discrimination, all of a sudden just like, no, you're off base with this. This whole anti-Semitism thing is off base, and got me to question my own perception of things. And so the podcast really is me strapping on my reporter's boots and saying, like, let me get off the internet and go across Canada and talk to people. Talk to people who say that it's happening to them. Talk to people who are part of the anti-Zionist movement. To talk to anyone who'll talk to me to actually figure out, like, something's happening. So what is it?
All right. So when you started diving into it, I know when I started doing what I was doing, and literally sleepless nights looking into what's happening, I got to some pretty sleepless nights, and that was just at the very beginning, right? How did you come about with looking into who you were looking into? Did you come up with it on your own? Who were you interviewing, or did that just kind of slowly evolve, or were you said, people telling you got to talk to so and so? Like, how did that come about? Because you interviewed some incredible people, and some who wouldn't do it. Some of the organizers of the counter protests, wouldn't do it. So, how did you come up with who you were going to talk to?
I reached out to community leaders, rabbis. I reached out in terms of like talking to Jews. I would follow up on, I think a lot of us, Canadian Jews, that is, have kind of receded from very public platforms where we can't necessarily trust the people, who we're connected with outside of Jewish circles to necessarily be sympathetic to what we have to say or what we're going through. And there's a lot of like WhatsApp threads and private messaging going on where, you like, and it's just the conversation whenever I get together with people since October 7th, like, did you hear what happened at this school? Did you hear what happened this week? Did you hear what happened to my friend? So a lot of those networks, just like putting the word out that, if people have been having these experiences and they want it to be known, they think that what's happened to them should be known. I am a journalist who is looking. And it took a lot of convincing, because I don't think the Jews have been necessarily treated so well by the Canadian press. And there's a lot of broken trust. So I encountered a lot of people who had spoken to the press, and then the story came out, and it really misrepresented what had happened to them and presented them as sort of these neurotic, kvetching, stereotypical complaining Jews at best, and at worst, really self-centered and paranoid and, oblivious to the bigger picture. So they just like didn't really feel like they could trust reporters necessarily. So, I just had to do that kind of source work where you're building that trust. And then I had a similar situation with the anti-Zionist crowd where, I've had over the years different people from like independent Jewish voices and a lot of people who are critics of Israel on our network. I have, friends and professional contacts who've been, big critics of Israel. So, and I knew some of the players in the protest movement, but after they would call it, my mask came off. I don't know that I ever had a mask on. I was always opposed to discrimination. I just didn't really have occasion to talk about anti-Jewish discrimination until October 7th. And then when I started talking about that, to some people, that revealed my hidden Zionist identity. So
There it is, the Zionists. Yeah, there was like, there was their gotcha moment.
yeah, it that was also just kind of took me aback that people live in this world of this sort of like they're in a movie where people are like secretly Mossad agents, or oh, Jesse, did you get your check for spreading your
Yeah,
Hasbara? Just very strange things that people believe are true of their neighbors. And so getting people from the movement, like I was honest. I'm like, look, I obviously disagree with you about some things, but I'm not inviting you to the studio to disagree with you. I'm trying to really understand how you arrived at your conclusions and how you arrived at a decision to act the way that you're acting, because a lot of it had to do with behavior that I think is just seemed to me to be objectively corrosive and antisocial and harmful behavior. So like, why are you doing this? But really, like, tell me what you think. Tell me what you think. What are you going to accomplish? Do you not think that this is harming people? I tried to have good faith conversations when I finally did get people in studio with me, and I did. I was able to get David Meslin, who's an anti-Zionist Jew, who's very
right.
prominent in protests, and a guy who is sort of a representative spokesperson of that notorious weekly protest at Bathurst and Shepherd, or at least he was at the time, this guy Moez Zaman. And they sat down with me for two, I think, pretty extraordinary interviews.
They were.
I'd never heard those kinds of exchanges before. I was really glad to get those conversations on the record.
So when you had those conversations, they were really eye opening. The ones you had, the parents of the students, like those were, as a Jew, more upsetting. Like, it was another story we heard. I can't believe it. But we've kind of taken it as, well, that's just the status quo now. But the other two you interviewed, let's talk about Moa's first. Like, he was pretty. Literally, if we'll take the mask off, he was very much unmasked. He was very open in what he was saying, and really
Yeah.
threw me for a loop for some of the stuff he said.
Well, I appreciate. I felt like he was a pretty honest guy,
Yeah,
who was willing to actually go there with me, because a lot of these things that we should have had conversations about early on, instead people have been yelling at each other. So a lot of Jewish people who say, well, from the river to the sea is a genocidal chant, and then protesters say, no, it isn't, that's not what it means. Well, that strikes me as something that we could sit down and like, okay, maybe I can accept that we have different understandings of what that means. Maybe you don't mean that there should be no Jews between the river and the sea. But what about from water to water, Palestine is
Palestine will
Arab?
be Arab. Right.
Or what does that mean? Or what does it mean? What does this upside down red triangle mean when you put that over the head of a Jewish person on social media, or you put it over my
I have
head?
one.
Yeah. What does that mean? And Moez was honest. He said that's how Jews are targeted. That's a symbol of violence. That's how Hamas identifies targets. And I said, well, then what does it mean to have that symbol on the streets of Toronto in a Jewish neighborhood? And he got to a point where it became less comfortable for him to explain these things. Some of the things he could explain is, well, that's not me, that was somebody else throwing up the Nazi salute. But some of the things, like the red triangle, he did brandish that violent symbol.
Yeah, I remember that.
So it was interesting. Like we got to a point in that conversation where he had to concede, and I think he was honest to concede. Yes, I can see how that threatens people. I could see how that menaces people. And given that this is a neighborhood that has had Jewish businesses and synagogues vandalized, burned, where people have been assaulted on the street. I could see how me showing up in that neighborhood might make people feel threatened who have nothing to do with these politics. But ultimately, he said, that's not enough reason for me to stop, because what I'm doing is more important than that. And that was honest too. I disagree very, very ferociously with what he's saying, but at least like that's the truth of this movement. They consider harm to Jews who have nothing to do with Israel to be acceptable collateral damage, because they're fighting, in their minds against what they see as a genocide and a Holocaust. So it's just a much bigger. It's just the scale of it. Who cares if my Jewish neighbor is afraid to leave their home, because I'm there chanting with these signs.
Yeah, we are here for a bigger cause.
Yeah, and at a minimum, let's understand who we're dealing with here. Let's understand who they are and what they think, and that I think was a moment of truth.
100%. And he was very honest. Then you have, David Meslin, who the same thing, and to go back, I think Moaz was the replacement for Naveed.
Yeah,
You
so
really wanted him.
you're familiar with Naveed, who
The
is the
his brother. I'm the reason his brother is busy.
are you?
Yeah.
That's
So hence
I
why
think
I have a triangle over my head.
I see. Well, I congratulate you for that, and I think it's something that it gets, there's like an anonymous account online that identifies members of the movement, the protest, the anti-Zionist
Leviathan.
movement, Leviathan, and there's lots of things that account says that I don't, about Muslims, that I'm deeply uncomfortable with. But the act of what some people consider doxing, but I consider just holding people responsible. People who want to mask their faces and go to Jewish neighborhoods and say horrible, violent things that lead to real violence, and then go to work as a realtor or something, or in a hospital.
Yeah.
You know what? I think you should have to wear the things that you say, and have your identity and your name connected to them. So to me, it's a kind of journalism. It's compatible with my ideas about, like, you want to engage in public discourse, you're going to have to stand by what you say. So I take my hat off to anybody who is honestly and in a fact-based way drawing attention to some of these things, because that's the only way that we enforce any kind of social norms, is by holding each other responsible to it.
It's about accountability. That's the biggest
Yeah.
thing. And that was when his brother said all that, and I brought it to the police the next day, and they even said, we don't know if it's enough, but 100% do it. And then 2 days later, I got a phone call, 4 different phone calls from 4 different departments saying we got it. Like, it was great.
That was when he was at City Hall, and he was
Yeah.
like jeering at children and calling their parents rapists and murderers and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And,
Uh,
and even some of the rhetoric they were saying, I had to look it up. I'm like, I haven't heard the Kazakhs in a long time. Like, there were so many things. I'm like, there's so many tropes that I had to I remember them. We heard
Yeah.
them about them, but I had to look it up and be like, oh my God, that's what he was saying. So,
The
that,
Khazars, yeah, we're all Turks or something. I don't.
yeah, it was crazy. But we had to look it up. And so that's also how really I got more involved in everything, obviously. So you wanted to have Naveed on, and that's he's still a prominent figure in all of this.
Yeah, he is like interesting, because he wrote me back, and he's kind of like got this weird sort of like friendly, warm and fuzzy kind of genial, even though he's said, for a menacing figure who said some atrocious things, I think he's called, the Jewish neighborhood where I grew up Zionist infested, which, I'm not aware of any Zionist political presence in Armor Heights. Like, that's just a Jewish neighborhood. The infestation is what rats do. So this is really evoking some pretty directly Nazi-like dehumanization.
That's exactly what it was. And I remember that I had actually done back in December when all this started in 23. Again, that's what got me involved. It was that video that they had done that got me really invested, where I sat up one night on X, probably till 4 a.m. Who is this person? I put videos out about it. Like, it was an eye opener. This wasn't the normal microaggression against anti-Semitism. This is a full bore. You're saying things that are just awful, and
Yeah, I would hope
dehumanizing.
that if anybody's just like kind of gets in a car and drives to like a very Muslim part of Scarborough or something and starts live streaming like hateful videos about, this is like they're vermin, and we're gonna hold them accountable. I would hope that the police would take notice of that. Like, like
Yeah,
that
as
that
they
that
should.
community should not have to deal with that. So, that somehow the same concern seems just like to be a hard thing for people to
Yeah.
access these days.
So you did want to get him on, but he couldn't do it. Essentially,
Yeah,
he was.
he said, I'm told that you're an honest guy and you'll treat me honestly, but he was saying, oh, my family, we have safety issues. It was interesting, which I'm sensitive to those safety issues, but like so do Jewish families, like but and then he connected me with Moez, who was willing to come on.
It's funny saying that about the whole safety issues. I had made a post one day, and I'd said he had commented on it, and I had replied to the comment on one of my posts, and it said, based on where, and I listed the city he's in. He sent me a private message saying, "Hey, do me a favor. We're both advocates. I don't list, I wouldn't attack you in your neighborhood." I'm like, "You do attack me in my neighborhood. What are you talking about? You've been in
Yeah,
my neighborhood since December 2023."
yeah, it's really wild. It's all of these things, that like just the offense that people take to being, doxxed, to being, it's like you were on or the hatred people have for Karim Assad for
Yeah.
videotapes. Like I thought that when you protest, you want to be seen. I thought that you want coverage and you want attention. And we're in a new era now where people want to take videos of themselves and share them with people who already agree with them. But if you're there and you're conceived of as it's not even about being on the other side, because Karim is an interesting and strange figure. Frankly, not a traditional journalist, but I've relied on the videos that she shot. Um, I'm not there every weekend taking those videos, and they're just sort of videos of incidents that happen at these protests that seem fairly neutrally presented. She is loathed so virulently, and it's so strange to me that uh, the act of engaging in public discourse with people who are seeking public exposure is considered such a crime. It's bizarre.
It's amazing, and she has done. She's captured a lot of the things that we've used to get things further along. Like that's one of the. She's an asset to everybody. I really think on every angle.
Yeah, I've seen
She
her
just
post
captured it.
videos of yeshiva buchers, being rude to protesters and even saying
Yeah,
racist things. Like, it seems like she's, if something happens, she'll post it. And ideally, this is to me one of the biggest things that's happening in Canada right now. And most days the media is not there. Most days the traditional news crews are not there documenting it. So, this is like we talked about citizen journalism years ago as like, oh, it's going to be great. And then in practice, people are, very dismissive of it. But, for whatever reason,
it's needed.
she's taken it upon herself to, to document this
And
stuff. And
she's really put herself on the line. She's taking it. So I give her all the props and the thank you for what she does, because she's doing what most people aren't doing. So let's go to the next guest you had. And I don't want to talk. There's more I want to get to, and we're crunched for time. Dave Meslin, having him on was honestly, I told you before, I was taking notes on that conversation, because one thing that really stuck out to me was, yes, I think any building that has a Star of David on it is a target.
yeah,
And
I mean, to be fair to him, it was the Israeli flag.
okay, Israeli flag.
Which is not much better when you consider that almost every synagogue has an Israeli flag. And it wasn't on it; it was just sort of anywhere associated. It was so. That was a really interesting conversation for me, and a difficult one because Moez is I know Dave Meslin, and as a fellow Toronto Jew, I kind of feel like I have a similar life experience, and I am certainly more angered by what he's doing and more offended than someone who has a very different life experience where my curiosity might be greater than my offense. But I really tried to like manage my emotions in talking to Meslin, because I similarly wanted to know how he got there. And I also know him as like kind of a sweet, thoughtful guy who's very interested in social justice. And he began as well with a very kind of soft spoken and kind of principled stand of like that he really like, but I think it's true. He is horrified by the violence that he's seeing from Gaza and beforehand, and wants to do something about it. And I understand that impulse. And he seemed like self-reflective and not quite sure, but doing his best. But as the conversation progressed, we do get to this point where he's just, I think there was less honesty there ultimately. He was denying that harm like is being
Yeah,
done. That Jews really, and the way that he defended that is like, well, no one's died yet in Canada.
right.
I didn't know that was a bar that we had to like. Do we have
I
to
hope
wait
we
for
don't have
that?
to hit that bar.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that.
And he had this analogy that to me does not is morally illogical. That like to the extent that these Canadian Jews are being harmed, he likened himself to a triage nurse. If he has to, this is the analogy he used. If he has to, decide who gets attention first, it's going to be the person getting bombed, not the person whose feelings are hurt. And that was like, I don't think that that's a very good argument for a lot of reasons. But the most interesting thing to me is that he he conceives of himself in that notion that he's there to give care and support and help or even save people. And he said that the harm that might be done to his Jewish neighbors is sort of trivial next to the lives that he could save. Those are his words.
Yeah.
Uh, I wish I'd asked him, like, what lives have you saved? Like the
Yeah.
idea that protesting in downtown Toronto with the keffiyeh on or whatever is saving someone's life, is a strange idea. I don't know, just on a logical basis how you get
Yeah.
there. But yeah, he did get to a point where he, and I think it really revealed something about the what I don't want to say the lie, because I think a lie has to be intentional, but I think that the thing that is not true
Yes. That's a
that
better way to say it. Yes.
anti-Zionists often say is uh, that this is not an attack on Jews. To attack Zionists is like a totally separate thing than to attack Jews. Well, we got to a place where he's saying 98% of synagogues in Canada are fair game for this angry protest movement that I think if you believe that angry, hateful speech is the precursor to violence, which I think is pretty
I
settled,
believe it is. Yes.
and if you agree that there has been hateful speech at pretty much every one of these demonstrations, it's just normalized at this point, and glorification of Hamas and Hezbollah is just that's not a bad apple thing. That's not like that's
Right.
what happens.
I,
He's saying that every synagogue is fair game for that. So how do you square those two statements that we're not? This is not a movement against Jews,
but
and
every
every
synagogue.
synagogue in the country is fair game. That doesn't compute.
Yeah, it doesn't. And then you look at how, not including Dave Bezel, but how the protests at Shepherd and Bathurst, for example, gravitated and moved and evolved into those grotesque signs.
Yeah,
Like, it
yeah.
which were
The
characters of Jews, not Zionists. What, like, whatever you want to picture that to be. It was very. We saw the evolution. And
well,
again,
almost like cartoonish, like if you were writing a script of it, it was like the way in which a somewhat ambiguous campaign where okay in the hot moment where people are being inundated with horrific images of death and destruction in Gaza, and crowds of people are there and they're there for different reasons, and there's lots of just like university students who want who are saying ceasefire, peace, ceasefire, and then like the strain of hatred that was already there beforehand, but then it explodes in popularity. And that strain of hatred as we progress through, well, there's no point in calling for a ceasefire anymore because there's a ceasefire. And there's, the voices that were never really about ceasefire that actually want violence, it gets concentrated and they get more and more extreme in their behavior. Well, we're only here if the pro-Israel people are here. Well, the pro-Israel people left, and
Yeah,
the
and they showed up
anti-Zionists.
anyway.
Yeah, and we're only here at the main intersection. We're not, our enemy is not, the actual neighborhood. Well, they start going into the neighborhood,
Yeah,
and our enemy is not the Jew, it's the Zionist. Well, those Anas Sial, what did he end up with his smirk? He had these disgusting images, dehumanizing images of Jews as demonic creatures. It's just on this clear trajectory that like you could write it,
yeah.
before it even
This is
happened.
watching it's watching a Hallmark movie where you know exactly where it's ending. Like
I
it's
mean,
it's
and this
it's
is the frustrating thing, Matthew, is like we know the script because we're Jews, and
yes,
we know this. We've been taught this. I was trained to anticipate this, to know it from its earliest signs. And then you're watching, and at first you're like, come on, this can't be like exactly what I
yeah,
was taught to. Oh no, it's exactly what I was taught to
exactly what we were
expect.
taught.
And then everyone else is in disbelief. Or it feels that way. It feels people like, come on, like
Well, I've had
it,
many conversations where I try to explain it. I say when to people who aren't Jewish, especially in leadership roles and members of parliament and provincial parliament, I say, I know you think that we sound like we're talking crazy and we're wearing tinfoil hats. This is not a conspiracy. This is actually what we know. We've been here before.
yeah, it's not like there's and people revert to these very ungenerous interpretations that like there's some special delight that Jews take in playing the victim or in complaining about these things. I really didn't think that anti-Semitism was like, I thought it was more or less dead, and I was like some latent thing that people
Yeah, I
say in
thought it was
private.
there. It was there by people who just they're the outliers who they're just
Yeah, it was not a big preoccupation or concern of mine, and I don't enjoy pointing it out or like I don't like. I'm not gonna say playing the victim. I don't like being a victim. It's not. It's actually not fun at
yeah.
all. It's not fun at all to
No.
be a member of a group that is tiny, vulnerable, and hated. It's really unpleasant because up until a few years ago, I did enjoy all of the privileges of being in a affluent society as a person who reads as white. Who by
Yeah.
modern standards, I am white. Strangely, I don't think my grandfather was considered.
Right.
These things are
They've
elastic.
evolved. They've evolved.
I've certainly benefited from that, and so I would much rather go back to that. I'm not really interested in being the Jew. Like, and my conception, I'm a downtown. Most of my circles, oh, like people say, oh, you're in the Jewish community. It's like one of my communities.
Yeah.
I orient myself around many different communities, and I want to preserve them. And it's not just for my own benefit. Like, I really don't like seeing my neighbor turn into an anti-Semite. Like, I don't like seeing my friends and colleagues start to accept and absorb and parrot back things that I think they're going to be ashamed of, or their children or grandchildren are going to be ashamed of them saying. I want to spare people from that because like I know where they're heading. Like we know
Yeah.
this. And you know who really knows the early signs of like anti-black racism is black people.
Right.
And the micro manifestations of that. Like we should listen to them when they, like you don't.
Yeah.
You know who knows sexism? Like women know sexism when they see it. You're like, so who knows anti-Semitism? Like
Right.
we're
And then we're told when we try to say we define or we argue back on it, we're told that we're wrong, which is again mind blowing.
yeah.
It's
But
it's a
like
whole new
the
level.
work that you're doing is strong, and it's I'm done pleading with people, or I'll put the evidence forward. But I'm not really trying to persuade anybody. You can't persuade somebody. There's such a social cost, I think, that people perceive, and maybe they're right, to caring about Jews right now. Like it's just not going to play well. It's not what people want to hear from anyone, and you can't persuade someone into like committing social suicide or saying things online that are going to cost them friends or get them yelled at. Like people really don't want to be scorned and yelled at, So it's a fool's errand to try to persuade people. I think there's a difference between taking a stand or keeping records or making a point than trying to persuade people. The only people I'm trying to persuade are the ones who are still persuadable, who can still be saved. I think. Like, I'm sorry to sound like such a missionary, but like,
No, but you're
we
right.
do understand these things better than a lot of non-Jewish people, and there's a lot of people who are legitimately and genuinely not sure what to think, or if I care about the rock thrown through the synagogue on my street, is that like I also care about Palestinians and I also care about Arabs, and I don't want to, like, how do I triangulate that? Like, that's who I
How do I
want to
pick a
reach.
side when I shouldn't have to pick a side?
Yeah, and I want, like, you don't. You can hate both of those things. You can hate Islamophobia and you can hate anti-Semitism. It's totally consistent.
Yeah.
There's no problem there.
Two things can be true at the same time. It's amazing
Yeah.
how it works. So I know we're pressed for time. You got to run in a minute, but I want to know. So with all that we've been watching this since to say October 23. We're now in April to almost May 26. I've been saying to people, they ask me a lot, where are we done? I'm like, I truly think it's going to get worse, and then it will start getting better. I have to believe that, number one, because I can't see it just getting worse, because we know if it doesn't get better, we know where it goes. But I really do think people are starting to see what's happening. I do. What are your thoughts? Where do you see this?
I mean, we're in a lull, but I don't think it's gone. I think that one thing that has been horrifying to witness firsthand, which again we knew from history, is just how contagious Jew
Hmm.
hatred is, just how like, it is a virus and it has been unleashed, and it's inside a lot of people. It's and most people have nothing to do with Jews, never met a Jew. So there's like a lot more people who've been absorbing anti-Jewish stuff than there are people who know us and know that it's bullshit. And that's in them now. That's in their brains. That's going to affect how they think of us, how they treat us, how they talk about us. That's not going to change. The day-to-day violence and hostilities seem to be ebbing, as the images out of the Middle East are not battering everybody's senses the way that
Hmm.
they were. That will flare up again, and now we have a very predictable thing of when it flares up, or when Iran gets bombed, like,
Yeah,
something
we know.
happens to a Jew here. That'll happen again as well. I do fear that there's truth to what you're saying, that, like, to actually smack some sense into people, would it take something as awful as a Bondi Beach style, but then I worry that that wouldn't even be enough, people rationalize anything. I don't
That's
think.
already happened. And they've moved past it, and that's where I see the biggest challenge we have is. And when we talk about, you know, when you look at the people who got infected by this virus, who are normal, they serve your barista. They this is the pleasure when you look at some of Karima's videos or any videos online. The pleasure they have is scary.
If you
The pleasure
this
they're
is, I'm
showing.
coming to understand this as well about anti-Semitism, is it's fun. They're having fun. They enjoy it. They're not having an argument. They're not, like, making fun of Jews, or putting Jews in a position, like, there's this old saying, like, the anti-Semite does not accuse the Jew of stealing because he thinks the Jew stole. He accuses the Jew of stealing to watch the Jew turn his pockets inside out, and plead, no, I'm innocent, So they like this. They like this game. The only thing ultimately that's going to suppress this, it's not going to eradicate it. It gets suppressed when that becomes the social cost of being a bigot has to be greater than the social cost of defending a Jew or caring about a Jew, or. So for a while, anti-Semitism was a really bad look. And the word is still considered a bad look, but now it's just got a new name. So
Zionism, yeah.
I think that the only thing that's going to work here is, and it's the truth, is not convincing everybody to give a shit about us, because they don't. It's convincing them of the truth, which is the anti-Zionists have a much wider agenda.
Yes, they do.
They do, and they'll tell you this themselves, and a lot of them are not even connected to the region. They're really motivated by grievance and their politics locally. They hate what they consider to be imperialism or Western civilization or society or colonialism. They hate capitalism. Some of them, they are setting their sights on the West, or the American empire as they conceive of it, and Israel is just sort of the iconic Death Star to them. But they are
100%.
part of an anti-social movement that wants to. Many of them will say we want to burn it all down. And if I think that there's a lot more people out there who don't want to burn it all down,
Right.
and who can be persuaded that people in military garb with face coverings and smoke bombs and occasionally real bombs are actually a threat to everybody. And maybe we should all.
Everybody threat. Yes, it's an everybody threat.
Yeah.
Amazing. Listen, I don't want to keep you. I know you have another appointment after this. Thank you so much, Jesse. We have to do this again. We have to keep on talking this. Love to have you on again. We can go down this road a lot. So
I'd be happy to. And thank you again for what you're doing. And I just want to encourage everybody, if they haven't listened to what is happening here, go listen to it. If you have listened to it, tell a friend. I have become so grateful and reconnected to Jewish community and to Jews I never knew before, and everybody, all these like brilliant, furious minds working on the same problem. It's actually been wonderful, but I want this to be heard outside of the community. So
we have to share
spread
it outside.
the word to somebody, share it outside of the community is the best thing. So
amazing, definitely. Grateful. So we appreciate all you're doing. I want to thank you again. Jesse Brown, make sure you head on to CanadaLand, you download the podcast, share with everybody, put it on your Facebook, your feeds, take it at work. I've said to friends of mine, they're like, what do I need to know? This. Just listen to this. This is your, let's prime you here. We can go on questions after that. So I want to thank you. Just stick around for 1 second when we're done, but this is Jesse Brown. Make sure you check him out. Matt Tobe, Unapologetically Jewish. We'll talk to you soon.